Welcome your friend and mine, Ensign Cargill.
In country music, some artists build catalogs that span decades, lasts every trend and every generation of competition. And then there are the other ones. The artists who walked into a studio, recorded one song, and produced something so complete and so perfectly itself that everything else they ever made existed in its shadow. These are 15 country songs from the 1960s and 1970s that defined an artist's entire career. One moment, one record, one shot that turned out to be everything. Number 15, Skip a Rope, Ensign Cargill, 1967. Told him about a song that every artist in Nashville had already passed on. Written by Jack Moran and Glenn Douglas Tubb, nephew of country pioneer Ernest Tubb, Skip accusing them of teaching their children dishonesty, hatred, and hypocrisy, all told from the innocent perspective of children at play. Every major label had passed on it. Monument Records took a chance. Cargill signed with no advance. The song reached #1 on the Billboard Country Chart in February 1968 and stayed there for 5 consecutive weeks. It was grand harmony on the recording. Billboard named it the #1 country song of 19. From Oklahoma City had walked off the job and straight to the top of the chart with a song about moral accountability that the entire Nashville estate. Cargill had a few more country chart entries after Skip a Rope, but the national spotlight. His grandfather had been the mayor of Oklahoma City in the 1920s. Johnny Cash was godfather to his oldest son, who was named Cash. One song about what children learn from watching adults was all it took to put him there, and all it took to define everything that came after. Number 14, Ode to Billie Joe, Bobbie Gentry, 1967. Bobbie Gentry wrote Ode to Billie Joe in approximately 30 minutes while sitting in her car outside a recording studio in Los Angeles. The song describes a family eating dinner on the 3rd of June, going through the ordinary motions of their meal, while the narrator's brother casually delivers the news that Billie Joe McAllister has jumped off the Tallahassee Bridge. The family keeps eating, they pass the biscuits, they discuss the crops. The narrator says almost nothing. What Billie Joe threw off the bridge before he jumped, the detail that has haunted listeners for nearly 60 years, is never mentioned. Gentry said later that she left it out deliberately because the family's indifference to the death was the real subject of the song, not the mystery itself. Capitol Records released it as a single in July 1967, and it spent 4 weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, knocking the Beatles off the top spot. It also hit #1 on the country chart. It sold over 3 million copies in its first month. Capitol had initially refused to release it as a single at all, believing a 7-minute Southern Gothic narrative with no conventional chorus was uncommercial. Her producer Kelly Gordon pushed back until they relented. He was right. Gentry won 3 Grammy Awards for the recording, including Best Female Pop Vocal Performance and Best Female Country Vocal Performance, the same song winning in both categories simultaneously.
Good up on Choctaw Ridge.
She released several more albums, had modest country chart entries through the early 1970s, and then in 1981 simply retired from music at 37 years old and declined every subsequent request for interviews, performances, and appearances. One final interview in 1978 was the last time she spoke publicly about her career. Nobody in the music industry knows where she lives now. The mystery of what Billie Joe threw off the bridge has been debated for 6 decades. The mystery of where Bobbie Gentry went is equally unresolved. Both remain open. Number 13, Harper Valley PTA, Jeannie C. Riley, 1968. Jeannie C. Riley was answering phones as a secretary at a Nashville music publishing company when songwriter Tom T. Hall placed a demo on her boss's desk. The song had already been turned down by several artists who found it too controversial. Her producer Shelby Singleton heard something in the demo that matched her voice, a specific combination of sweetness and steel, and booked a studio session. The entire recording, including the band tracks and Riley's vocal, was completed in a single afternoon on June 26, 1968. It was released on August 1st, 1968. Within 2 weeks, it had sold 1 million copies. By October, it had become the first single in history to simultaneously reach #1 on both the Billboard Country Chart and the Billboard Hot 100 in the same week. It stayed at #1 on the country chart for 3 weeks and sold over 6 million copies internationally. Riley won the Grammy Award for Best Female Country Vocal Performance. The woman who had been answering someone else's phone that morning had the biggest country crossover of the year by that October.
Had a teenage daughter who attended Harper Valley.
Riley had several more modest country chart entries after Harper Valley PTA, but nothing that came close to its commercial impact. The song generated a 1978 television film and a subsequent TV series. She eventually left mainstream country music and became a Christian music artist, which was her own deliberate and public choice. One afternoon in a Nashville recording studio was all it took. A secretary, a demo nobody else wanted, and a song about a woman who walks into a PTA meeting and wins. Number 12, Little Green Apples, O.C. Smith, 1968.
Well, I wake up in the mornings with my head.
Bobbie Russell wrote Little Green Apples in 1968, and Roger Miller recorded it first. Miller's version was fine. Then O.C. Smith, a singer from Mansfield, Louisiana, who had spent years as a jazz vocalist and big band performer before moving toward country crossover territory, recorded it for Columbia Records with producer Ernie Wilkins. Smith's arrangement stripped away the ornament and let his voice do the work. Warm, direct, and unhurried, it was the kind of performance that makes a song sound like it was always his.
Drops what she's doing. She hurries down.
It reached #2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and #1 on the Adult Contemporary chart, also charting significantly on country radio. It won the Grammy Award for Best Country Song in 1969, the first time the award had gone to a song recorded primarily by a non-country artist. Bobbie Russell, who wrote it, also wrote Honey for Bobby Goldsboro and Watching Scotty Grow in the same year, making 1968 one of the more commercially extraordinary single years any Nashville songwriter ever had. Smith's version was the one that played everywhere, in shopping malls, on country radio, in department stores, until the song became part of the ambient soundtrack of the year.
Not loving me.
Smith continued recording through the 1970s, had modest subsequent chart entries, and eventually became a minister in Los Angeles, running a church in Torrance, California for much of the latter part of his life. He died in 2001 at 64. A jazz singer from Louisiana walked into a Columbia record studio and made the best country-adjacent record of 1968. 1 Grammy, 1 song, 1 performance, and a career that is remembered almost entirely for that single afternoon.
And I look across at smiling lips that won't.
Number 11, Rose Garden, Lynn Anderson, 1970.
I beg your pardon.
Joe South wrote Rose Garden in 1970, and it sat in a publisher's catalog until producer Glenn Sutton, who was also Lynn Anderson's husband, recognized immediately what it could become. Anderson was 23, had been performing since childhood, and had grown up inside the music industry as the daughter of professional country songwriter Liz Anderson, who had written hits for Merle Haggard. Lynn had a vocal clarity and directness that Sutton knew would work for the song's central statement. I beg your pardon, I never promised you a rose garden. He was right about that too.
I never promised you a rose garden.
Released in November 1970, it reached #3 on the Billboard Hot 100, #1 on the country chart, and #3 in the United Kingdom, where it ultimately sold over 1 million copies, making Anderson the first female country artist to achieve a platinum record in the UK. It remained on the British charts for 40 consecutive weeks. The song eventually sold 12 million copies internationally, one of the best-selling country recordings of all time.
So smile for a while.
Anderson had subsequent chart entries and continued recording throughout the 1970s and beyond, winning the Grammy Award for Best Female Country Vocal Performance in 1971. She and Sutton divorced in 1976. She died in July 2015. Rose Garden was so commercially dominant that everything she recorded after it existed in its shadow. 12 million copies of a song about refusing to make false promises, delivered by a 23-year-old who made it sound like something she had known her whole life. Number 10. Delta Dawn, Alex Harvey, 1971. Alex Harvey, the Nashville songwriter, not the Scottish rock musician of the same name, wrote Delta Dawn with Larry Collins in 1971. The song describes a woman in a small Alabama town who has lost her mind waiting for a man of wealth and fame who was supposed to marry her and never came back. She still wears the faded rose. She still walks the streets in her bridal gown. She is still waiting. Harvey took the song to his publisher and got it placed with a small label for his own recording. His independent version in 1971 established the song on enough radio stations to create awareness before Tanya Tucker heard it and recorded her version in 1972 at 17 years old. Tucker's version gave the song its first major country chart run. Then Helen Reddy recorded a pop version in 1971 and had a #1 pop hit with it in 1973, making Delta Dawn one of the most commercially performed songs of the early 1970s across both formats. Harvey's name as the songwriter was on every recording that anyone ever heard. His own version, the original, was the one that established the melody and the character that all subsequent recordings followed. Harvey never had another major hit as a recording artist and has remained largely unknown to the general public despite the fact that Delta Dawn has been covered by dozens of artists and is recognized as one of the great country songs of its era. In the Nashville songwriter economy of the early 1970s, the man who wrote and first recorded a song that then made two other people famous was not an unusual story. It was almost a tradition. Harvey's career is defined by the song he wrote, the version he recorded first, and the fame that arrived for everyone else. Number 9. Happiest Girl in the Whole USA, Donna Fargo, 1972. Donna Fargo was a school teacher in Covina, California, named Yvonne Vaughn, who had been performing on weekends under a stage name for years without commercial success. She wrote Happiest Girl in the Whole USA about her own marriage to her manager Phil Branson and recorded it for Dot Records in 1972. The label had no high expectations for it. The song opens with a woman waking up next to the man she loves and listing every small perfect thing about her morning. The sun, the radio, the coffee, the simple fact of being where she is, with who she is with. It was unguardedly happy, in a way that country music of the era rarely allowed itself to be. It reached #1 on both the Billboard Country Chart and the Adult Contemporary Chart in 1972, crossed over to the Pop Top 10, and won Donna Fargo the CMA Single of the Year Award and the CMA Female Vocalist of the Year Award, both in the same year, for her debut single. She also won the ACM Top Female Vocalist Award. She followed it with Funny Face, which also reached #1, making her the first female country artist in history to have her first two singles both hit #1. For a school teacher who had been playing weekend gigs under a pseudonym, those were among the more remarkable 12 months in country music history.
So shoes look funny, honey, it's almost 9.
In 1979, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, which gradually affected her performing career. She managed the disease with a public openness unusual for her era, and continued writing and recording into her later years. The Happiest Girl in the Whole USA remains the song she is remembered for above everything else. A school teacher from California who wrote about her own joy and accidentally made one of the most joyful records country music has ever produced.
Now you make the coffee, I'll make...
Number 8. The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia, Vicki Lawrence, 1973.
He was on his way home from Candletop.
Bobbie Russell wrote The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia and did not think much of it. The publishers did not know how to pitch it either. It was not quite country and not quite pop, and nobody could figure out where it belonged. They offered it first to Liza Minnelli. She passed. Then they offered it to Cher. Cher's husband and manager, Sonny Bono, turned it down on her behalf. believing the song's Southern Gothic darkness might offend Cher's Southern fan base. Cher did not find out she had been offered the song until years later. With no singer willing to record it, Russell, who was married to Vicki Lawrence at the time, watched as Lawrence, a comedian and actress known entirely for The Carol Burnett Show, recorded the demo herself in the studio after Russell left for the night. Producer Snuff Garrett heard the demo and decided she should release it properly. It reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in April 1973 and stayed there for 2 weeks, selling over 1 million copies. It peaked at #36 on the Billboard Hot Country Singles chart. The song, a Southern Gothic murder ballad in which a man is executed for a crime he intended to commit but did not actually commit, with the real murderer revealed only in the final line, was so narratively dense that people were still debating its plot details decades later. Quentin Tarantino discussed the song's storyline in a scene in Reservoir Dogs in 1992. It was the basis for a 1981 film. It went viral again on social media in 2025. Lawrence released a few more singles after the hit, none of which made any significant commercial impact, and returned her focus entirely to television. She remained on The Carol Burnett Show for all 11 seasons, developed the character Mama, and starred in Mama's Family for 6 seasons. The song was the only hit of her music career, written by her husband, originally offered to Cher, and released by a television comedian who had never been primarily known as a singer. One #1 from one song that nobody thought would work is All There Is, and it has never stopped being discussed.
Slipping through the backwoods quiet as a mouse came upon.
8 songs down, 7 to go, and the back half of this list has some of the most extraordinary stories in the entire countdown. Before we continue, if you have not subscribed yet, do it now and hit the bell. This channel covers classic country history every week, and you will not hear about it any other way. 7 left. Let's keep going. #7. Wildfire. Michael Martin Murphey, 1975.
She comes down from yellow.
Michael Martin Murphey was working 22 hours a day on a concept album for Kenny Rogers called The Ballad of Calico when he fell asleep on the floor of his collaborator Larry Kanzler's apartment in Los Angeles and dreamed the entire song in its totality. He knocked on Kanzler's door when he woke up. They finished writing it over coffee in a few hours. His producer Bob Johnston did not want to record it. When Murphey lobbied to include it on the album, Johnston told him directly, "I don't see that one. I can't see how that would ever take off." Murphey pushed until the song was included on the album. They recorded it at Caribou Ranch in Colorado at 10,000 feet elevation. After the sessions were done, Johnston played the album for the kitchen staff, young women aged 18 to 22 working at the ranch, to test the material. They went wild for Wildfire. Johnston called Epic Records immediately and said the song was getting a great reaction from people who had heard it, and they needed to push it as the lead single. Even then he told Murphey, "Well, what do I know?" before making the call. Wildfire reached #3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in June 1975, topped the adult contemporary chart, displacing Love Will Keep Us Together, and was certified platinum by the RIAA for selling over 2 million copies in the United States. Western Writers of America later named it one of the top 100 Western songs of all time. The song is about a ghost horse and the girl who froze to death searching for it in a Nebraska blizzard, written from a dream inspired by a Native American legend Murphy's grandfather had told him as a small child. Murphey went on to have additional country hits in the 1980s, including What's Forever For and A Long Line of Love, and built a substantial career in Western cowboy music that produced 6 gold albums and 9 Grammy nominations. But Wildfire is the song he has described as the one that broke his career open and keeps it fresh, the one that appeals to children and therefore always brings new listeners. 50 years after its release, he recorded a new duet version with Cody Johnson. The dream song that his producer did not want to record turned out to be the one that defined everything.
But there came an early snow.
#6. I Can Help. Billy Swan, 1974.
If you got a problem, don't care what it is.
Billy Swan had spent more than a decade in the Nashville music industry doing everything except having a hit of his own. He had written Lover Please for Clyde McPhatter in 1962. He had worked as a janitor at a Columbia recording studio in Nashville and quit while Bob Dylan was recording Blonde on Blonde. He had produced Tony Joe White's 1969 swamp rock hit, Polk Salad Annie. He had toured as a member of Chris Christopherson's band for years. Then Christopherson and his wife Rita Coolidge bought Swan a small RMI organ as a wedding gift, and Swan was sitting alone when the chorus came to him. I Can Help. He had the song finished in minutes. He recorded I Can Help at Young & Sound Studio in Murfreesboro, Tennessee on a $19,000 album budget. A music industry evaluator hired by Monument Records to assess the sessions declared before release that there were no hits on the record. I Can Help was released in July 1974. By November, it had reached #1 on both the Billboard Hot 100 and the country chart simultaneously, one of the rare records to top both charts in the same week. Elvis Presley recorded his own version in 1975. The song appeared in the films Thor and Zootopia decades later. Swan went back to touring with Christopherson's band after the hit faded, which was exactly what he wanted to do. He made additional solo albums and continued working as a session musician, but I Can Help was the only commercial peak of his performing career. The RMI organ that Christopherson gave him as the wedding gift that inspired the song was not actually used on the final recording. A different organ was available in the studio that day. The instrument that started everything was not on the record. That may be the most perfectly Nashville detail in this entire list. Number 5. Before the Next Teardrop Falls. Freddie Fender, 1975.
If he brings you happiness.
Baldemar Garza Huerta was born in San Benito, Texas, the son of Mexican migrant farm workers, and had been recording rockabilly and country songs in Spanish and English under the name Freddie Fender since the late 1950s. In 1960, he was arrested in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, for marijuana possession and sentenced to 5 years of hard labor at the Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola. Governor Jimmy Davis, the same man who had recorded You Are My Sunshine in 1940, pardoned him after 3 years on the condition that he stay out of Louisiana. Fender went back to Texas, worked as a mechanic, played small clubs on weekends, and spent the better part of a decade going nowhere.
Teardrop falls.
Producer Huey Moe found him in the early 1970s. Before the Next Teardrop Falls had been written in 1967 by Ben Peters and Vivian Keith, and recorded several times without success. Fender's version, recorded in 1974 and released in early 1975, reached #1 on both the Billboard Hot 100 and the country chart simultaneously. He was the first Hispanic artist to reach #1 on the country chart. He was also 40 years old, had served 3 years in a Louisiana state prison, and had been working as a mechanic in Texas less than 5 years before the song hit. The record sold over 2 million copies. Fender continued having chart entries through the mid-1970s and later became a member of the Texas Tornadoes, alongside Doug Sahm, Flaco Jimenez, and Augie Myers. He was inducted into the Texas Music Hall of Fame and died in October 2006 at 69. Before the Next Teardrop Falls was the song that gave a man who had spent years rebuilding his life from prison and a mechanic's garage his one perfect moment at the center of American music. And it is the record that defines him above everything else he ever made. Number 4. Blanket on the Ground. Billy Joe Spears, 1975.
That big old moon is shining down.
Roger Bowling wrote Blanket on the Ground as a song about a married couple sneaking away from their ordinary life to have a romantic picnic, not with someone new, but with each other. The premise was the romance of falling in love with your own spouse all over again. It reached #1 on the Billboard Country Chart and #1 on the UK Singles Chart, where it spent 6 weeks at the top, the biggest country hit in British chart history at that point. It charted across Europe, Australia, and Canada, establishing Billy Joe Spears as one of the most internationally recognized country artists of the decade outside the United States.
Tell me now, don't
Spears performed it on Top of the Pops in the UK, giving her a television audience of millions of British viewers who had never watched a country music performance before. She was one of the first American country artists to recognize that the British country audience was genuinely large and genuinely loyal, and she cultivated it deliberately for the rest of her career. She toured the UK regularly and built a following there that outlasted her American commercial peak by years.
On a blanket on the ground.
Spears died in December 2011 at the age of 73. She had subsequent country chart entries in both the United States and the United Kingdom, but Blanket on the Ground is the record that opened country music to a British audience that had not previously considered it their genre. A song about a married couple and a picnic spent 6 weeks at #1 in Britain, and every country artist who has toured the UK since owes something to the audience that Billie Joe Spears helped build.
That old moon was our best buddy.
Number 3, I'm Not Lisa, Jessi Colter, 1975.
I'm not leaving.
Jessi Colter was born Miriam Johnson in Phoenix, Arizona, one of 7 children of a Pentecostal preacher. She had been playing piano at her father's church since she was 11 years old. She married guitarist Duane Eddy at 19 and toured with him through the early 1960s. After their divorce, she met and married Waylon Jennings in 1969, and for the first several years of that marriage, she focused on raising their family while Jennings built his outlaw country career. She wrote songs during those years, for herself, for other artists, and continued working on her own material without expectation of commercial breakthrough.
Years ago.
She wrote I'm Not Lisa in 1975 and recorded it for Capitol Records. The song describes a woman being called by the wrong name by a man still in love with someone else, someone named Lisa who left him. The woman in the song knows she is not the one he wants. She knows she is a stand-in for someone he cannot have back. She tells him so, directly, without anger, and with the patience of someone who has understood this from the beginning. It is one of the most emotionally precise country songs of its decade. It reached #1 on the Billboard Country Chart and #4 on the Billboard Hot 100. Colter contributed to the 1976 Wanted, The Outlaws album, the first country album certified platinum by the RIA, and has continued performing and recording into her 80s. She and Jennings were married until his death in 2002. I'm Not Lisa is still the song that stops a room, the voice of a woman telling a man the hardest truth she knows, with the patience of someone who has made peace with not being the person he is looking for. Virtually overnight after its release, Colter was selling more records than Jennings himself. The song she wrote alone in a few quiet years she had set aside for other things turned out to be the one that defined her entirely. Number 2, Convoy, C.W. McCall, 1975. C.W. McCall was not a real person. He was a character invented by Bill Fries, an advertising executive from Omaha, Nebraska, for a series of old homebred commercials in 1973. The character worked so well in the commercials that Fries started recording trucking songs under the name, signed with MGM Records, and built a catalog of highway narratives before writing Convoy in 1975 after listening to CB radio chatter on his drive home from work. He had never driven an 18-wheeler in his life. He drove a Jeep CJ5, but the language of the truckers he heard on the CB radio was so specific and so vivid that the song wrote itself around it.
Live looks like we've got us a convoy.
It reached #1 on the country chart for 6 weeks, and #1 on the Hot 100 the week it knocked the Bay City Rollers Saturday night from the top spot. It sold over 2 million copies. Rolling Stone ranked it number 98 on its list of the 100 greatest country songs of all time. Sam Peckinpah directed a film based on it in 1978, starring Chris Christopherson and Ali MacGraw. The song became an anthem for the Freedom Convoy protests in Canada in 2022, 46 years after it was recorded, and Fries, then 93 years old, gave the protesters his blessing in what turned out to be one of his final interviews. Fries retired to Ouray, Colorado, where he was elected mayor and served 6 years. He died on April 1, 2022, at 93. He had been an advertising executive, a fictional truck driver, a country chart topper, a film inspiration, and a small-town mayor. Convoy is the song that made all of it possible. A #1 hit built on CB radio language by a man who drove a Jeep and invented himself from scratch for a bread commercial.
With 1,000 screaming trucks and 11 long.
Number 1. Luckenbach, Texas. Waylon Jennings, 1977.
Life that make it worth living.
Bobbie Emmons and Chips Moman wrote Luckenbach, Texas in 1977, and neither of them had ever been to Luckenbach when they wrote it. Moman was Waylon Jennings' producer at the time, and he knew the best way to get Waylon interested in a song was to tell him he could not have it. He told Waylon he had already promised the song to someone else. Waylon said he wanted it. Moman relented. Waylon recorded it in January 1977 at American Sound Studio in Nashville. Willie Nelson was not scheduled to be there. He had just dropped by unannounced and ended up singing the final chorus. The song named Waylon himself in its own lyrics, which Waylon found uncomfortable. His son Shooter later said, Waylon simply did not like the idea of referring to himself in the third person in a song. He recorded it anyway and knew when they played it back that it was a hit. It debuted at number 48 on the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart, the first single in history to debut in the top 50, and reached number 1 on May 21, 1977, where it stayed for 6 weeks. The album it came from, Ol' Waylon, had over 500,000 pre-sales and debuted at number 1 on the country album chart. 20 years after the song was a hit, Waylon finally visited Luckenbach, Texas for the first time, performing at one of Willie Nelson's 4th of July picnics. He had recorded the most famous song about the place without ever having been there. The town of Luckenbach has a permanent population of 3 people. Because of the song, it receives tens of thousands of visitors every year from across the world. The song Waylon hated singing every night became the one that put a ghost town on the map, defined the outlaw country movement as a philosophical position rather than just a marketing category, and closed every major show he played for the rest of his career. He told his drummer to remind him when picking singles that he had to sing that song every night. He sang it every night for 25 years. That is what a career-defining record does. It becomes the thing you cannot escape, because it said something true enough that nobody ever stops wanting to hear it again.